Thank you. So again, welcome to Breaking Unjust Laws. If you're here, you probably know that a lot of states have laws on the books that make it illegal for public sector workers to strike. We have one such law in New York State, the infamous Taylor Law, that makes it illegal for public sector workers to strike, including us workers at CUNY and SUNY. And if you're here, you're not a member of PSC or UUP, we welcome you. We want to hear how it affects you as well. So strikes are our most powerful weapon as workers. It's really hard to organize and exercise our power as workers when these laws are on the books the way they are in New York State with the Taylor Law. And yet workers across the US in all kinds of states go on strike. They go on strike in right to work states, and they go on strike in states that have these laws on the books like we do, including Michigan and in Connecticut and Massachusetts. So often in our unions, we talk about the Taylor Law, and we talk about it as a law and all the legal details and the history of it and the compromises that it achieved and the pros and cons. And today is a little bit different. Today, rather than get mired in the legal details, which we can always talk about more, we're gonna reframe it a bit. We're gonna think about the Taylor Law as a law that limits our power as workers and that infringes on our right as workers to exercise that power of striking. And we're super excited to have with us leaders of two unions, educator unions, fellow educator unions, that are also located in states that have laws like the Taylor Law that make it illegal for public sector workers to strike. And they went on strike anyway, and they won. So we have with us today Jessica Wender-Schubau, who is the president of Brookline Educators, a union of Brookline teachers and other school workers, who recently had a strike, a successful one, even though Massachusetts makes striking illegal. And we have Mark Higbee, who is the vice president of the Eastern Michigan University AAUP chapter, which is a union of faculty there, who also had a strike. And at EMU, I know that they're facing a lot of the same austerity conditions that we are facing both on our CUNY and SUNY campuses. So the format of our event today is that we're going to hear from Jessica and from Mark for a bit, but then we're going to have a nice chunk of time to have an opportunity to ask them questions about their strategy, how they thought about their breaking their laws, and to hear each other as we also build our power as workers in New York State. So I'm going to kick it off to Jessica and Mark by asking them two questions. One is, how did you decide to break the law and convince your members to do it? And was it worth it? So Jessica, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to see we're going to have a dialogue together tonight. I'm going to be really brief in the hope that we can talk about where you're at and start where you are. But let me just share a little bit of the background that when I think about breaking laws out of my own history and how and why I think this is such an exciting moment. I'm 62 and I spent 10 days in jail in my early 20s, 1981, with the Women's Pentagon Action and in Virginia. And one of the things that we encountered in that experience was that when you break a law, you're not doing it in a static way, you change the terrain itself. And there were a bunch of us that were in a big space together and with a lot of intimidation, not being allowed to go to restrooms and things. And one of the things that came up there was that the more we push back against guards, the more angry they got and the more divided the people felt. It was all women, for fear that things would get worse. But over time in that period, people began to just resist the feeling of dehumanization. And at one moment, one of the guards said, "Why are you doing this to me? I'm just an organ of the state." And I never forgot it, because this guy who started out being such a bastard, eventually found his own humanity through not being allowed to continue to operate without any interference in this role that he had. And so that has stayed with me. But why did we break the law? Our strike happened last May. There are 1,200, just under 1,200 members in our local. We had a strike that was settled in the middle of the night after the first day. And I'd be happy to go into some of the details, but I think you're probably more interested in the organizing. For years, as a union activist, I always heard from people that you're supposed to do all these things before you're allowed to take radical action. You got to have your lists right, and you've got to have your, build up from less to more. And, if you don't have a 1 to 10 structure, communication structure, you're not ready. And there were always conversations about why we couldn't do it. Right. And this is apart from whether it was legal or not. This was even how we held ourselves back internally. And the first thing I would say about why we broke the law is because our members made us do it. All right. If you keep banging your head against the wall month after month and year after year, which is what we were running into with a very intransigent school district and school board. And our members started to say, why are you telling me to do the same things that haven't worked before? I'm tired. I'm overworked. I'm frustrated. I'm demoralized. I'm pissed off. And you're not giving me anything that makes me think that anything's going to be different. And there was a certain point in which the negotiators on our team and our action team, our CAT, contract action team, said, our members, if we don't actually take seriously what they're saying, they're going to get pissed at us and we're going to start looking ineffectual. That's what moved us into a higher gear. And so we finally decided that we were going to make or break this thing. We were going to pick a date. It happened to be about 4 weeks after the kind of conversations I'm telling you about. And we said, on that date, it was May 12th, I think was our date, May 17th, get it ready. We are either going to ratify a contract or we are going to withhold our labor. And the negotiators said to the membership, we don't think that we can move these people any further at this point. We feel that we're stuck. And so we're calling that date. And so that date got called, and we said, we're going to build toward it with like 4 actions. We put them on a flyer, and we basically told the district that was the end game. That was the last day. And there was going to be a big action. Now in Massachusetts, you cannot use the word strike. But I brought this little law here. I'm going to tell you what it says from the 1919 law, still in place. No public employee or employees organization shall engage in a strike, and no public employee or employee organization shall, now there's the key, here's the key, shall induce, encourage, or condone any strike, work stoppage, slow down, or withholding of services by such employees. Right, so you'll notice that in so-called blue Massachusetts, you're not even allowed to say positive things about a strike. You're not allowed to suggest the discussion. So we started by saying we're going to have big action, and it's going to be different. And then we told people, let's, get going. And we went to the school board meeting, and we turned people out at the select board meeting where the money comes from. And then we got closer. And here's where the fact that the strike was illegal, I think, was our friend. We always say the boss is the best organizer, and they helped us by having the most reactionary threat. Now, there's another thing in Massachusetts, not sure you have the same in New York. And that is what a lot of people don't know is you can be moved to impasse, and then they can impose their last best offer. And they put these poison pills in there. We think they were trying to push us to this. We think they might have even been pushing us to a strike. But the fact that we couldn't write about the strike, we couldn't say, let's get together and plan one, made it necessary for us to build the relationships that were the critical part of the success. No emails, no like Google forms, no surveys, nothing about how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? In fact, what we did, and I want to sort of really give you the nuts and bolts because it seems mysterious, but it actually is about incredibly concrete steps. And that is, we said that we needed to talk to 1,150 members. We were not going to go on strike unless we had 95%. We were going to know what the vote was before we ever got near a meeting where we would have one. And we would come up with a 1, 2, and 3, and 4 number. And they often say lists are the most important kind of thing, and watch your list. I'll come back to that in a sec. But the 1, 2, 3, 4 was sort of logically what you might expect. 1 is, why didn't we do it already? 4 is, I'm going to cross the line and do what the boss tells me. 2 is, well, maybe, if everyone else does it, I'll do it. And 3 is, I really don't know. And what we said was, you cannot ask the member what number they are. You have to have a conversation with them and decide for yourself. Why? Because we need you, and who are the yous I'll come back to, we need you to get a real respectful sense of one another. Have a real conversation. And you decide what the number is, and we're going to go back to the 3s. And what questions does the member have? What are their worries? What are their concerns? Ask them. Write it down. Put it in this spreadsheet. So this is based on the 1 to 10 structure. There's no way we could do this. You can't talk to 1,150 people without being organized. And so in Massachusetts, in the Mass Teachers Association, that's our statewide union, we call it the 1 to 10 structure. And we call people the 1s of the 10s. We couldn't come up with a better idea. And it says, roughly, we need to have a number 1 that is responsible for 10 people. And we want you to talk to them in person. If you can't find them in the building, we want you to call them on the phone, but you cannot email them except to arrange the time. And of course, this worked because there was a real reason. If we had been outed as preparing for a strike, they would have had an injunction against us. And they would have imposed fines. And then we'd start to be ticking away on our reserves. So there was a rationale that wasn't fake. And there was real action connected to it. And so we created an FAQ, a document of the questions in a live Google Doc so that members could see they were really being heard. If I had a real concern about, will this happen? What about this? Can this happen? And I see my question being addressed. And we just let it get longer and longer and longer. Now, this FAQ has become kind of famous because when they came after us legally, they put this in the indictment, in the charge document. They said, if we let them get away with this is a blueprint for how to do a strike. Now, we thought, oh, thanks for sharing. We're not going to give it to everyone else in Massachusetts, which we have been doing. And so that document was a place that you could go and assuage some of the anxiety. Would your fear go away? No. But what happened was a sense of, I am finally doing something new. We are finally feeling a sense that we're not asking permission. This is very important, I think, for K through 12 educators, because especially in the post-COVID period, in a place like Brookline, which is surrounded by the city of Boston, and it's, a complicated place, but there are a lot of PhDs like you guys. Some of you, there are a lot of highly educated people. They think they're very, very smart. They think they're smarter than you, in fact. And there's a lot of intimidation going on about what educators should do to be sort of servants. And what this process did was to say, I don't need permission to have self-respect. And let me, and by the way, we brought somebody in, sort of like, we're sharing our stories with you, that said this to us. And we were like, oh, wow, really? Because everyone's like, we don't have the message right. Well, we maybe we should still try to convince them. What about the parents? All of these things about anything but, I have a right to dignity and self-respect already. I do not need to convince anybody. And that is the kind of back and forth we had. And I think I'm probably coming out of time. So I will say that we called a meeting and I was petrified. No one was going to come. 900 members came. And just prior to that, we called in every single person who had said anything positive about this process. And we said, we're having an organizing meeting, you need to come. 250 people came, and we gave them a job. No matter, whether they were leaders or on committees, or we never met them before, really. We'd say, you're going to be a picket captain. You're going to be a building lead. You're going to be on the action team. We need you to like help with the signs or whatever. We, in this process, you don't have a job. We need more ones. We need to do this. We did 2 rounds of talking to 1,150 people. And the last thing I'll share is about lists and about organizing. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I read actually on Facebook, I think, and then found the PDF of a pamphlet from the 1930s, I think 1935, written by William Z. Foster, who organized the steel industry, also a communist leader. And you can go get this thing. And in it, he says, have good lists and guard them carefully. And this is a remarkable, we had an amazing CAD team that tracked all of this information and made sure that nobody was left out. And what we were doing, the sort of organizing team, was going through these lists in those final days and saying, what's happening in this building, in this department, who hasn't been called, who's gonna call, get the information, did it happen? Because when we went out on strike that morning, we had 900 people sign on to the picket line. And that does not happen by accident. It happens by engagement. And I think that the remarkable lesson I learned was something I read in school called dialectics. The people themselves were transformed by this, the members themselves. And I think this was something that I often forget. We get so into like the steps and the rules and the methods that we forget that when you act together, and I've heard a lot about this, that people say, I have never felt this level of disrespect in memory. I have never felt joy like this as an educator. I met people on the picket line I had never met in my own building. No accident. This is how corporate ed reform works, to divide people and to separate them and to keep them in grade level teams and all this stuff, and to make sure that they never experience this kind of shared power. So let me stop there and look forward to hearing from Mark and you.
Well, Jessica, thanks. Amazing. Can't wait to ask you questions. Mark, let's turn to you.
Thank
How'd you
very much.
decide to break the law, and was it worth it?
Well, it was worth it. We saved our health care, not just for our own union members, but for every other worker on the campus. They come for the strongest first, they knock you off. And on my campus, my union is the strongest employee union by far. So they were going to just take it away from people if we gave up. And we got a raise. Not a big raise, but if you make less, if you on the bottom 50% of the faculty salary, you got a 7% raise this first year. And the university had said, we can't afford nothing, so take 0 raise. And we said, up yours. Well, we didn't put it quite that way, but that's what it amounted to. Not everybody, now I'm off track a little bit. EMU AAUP is a union of about 500 people these days who are only tenured or tenured track. Other instructors are in a different union, because way back in the 50-year history of the AAUP at Eastern, we looked down on those part-timers. There should be no part-timers. Faculty should all be full-time. Now, that idea was dead before I was hired at Eastern in 1994, but a lot of people hung on to it. And thus the part-timers had to form their own union elsewhere. But we cooperate now. So why do we strike against the law? Well, we have a history of striking. We had, in my first 10 years at Eastern, we had a strike in the year 2000, another one in 2004, and another one in 2006. That was the last strike we had in 2006 until 2022. We did not expect to strike this year. Did not expect to, did not plan to. Management hired, their strategy was give them nothing. And the Michigan law does ban public employees striking, but it also says that management and labor have to, if they have a union, have to engage in good faith bargaining. And Michigan is an industrial school. Michigan is an industrial union state. People have an idea of what good faith bargaining is. If you say you're in good faith bargaining, but you refuse to meet with the other side, that's prima facie evidence that you're not bargaining in good faith, even if you say in many different press releases that you're bargaining in good faith. So Eastern students and faculty and the community understood that the university was faking it. So we called, the semester started a couple days, the last 2 days before August. Our contract expired at midnight, August 31st. The strike authorization vote was right before the semester started. We authorized the bargaining team to call a strike if they thought that was necessary. It didn't work because the management didn't respond and start bargaining seriously. And so we had another vote. And both these votes were like 90%. Yes, 90, 91, 95, 94%, authorizing us to strike. And then we did strike. After our contract had expired, our contract includes a no strike provision. So we didn't go on strike before the contract expired, because then you could use the contract against us for going on a strike. But the strike, we didn't plan on going on strike. We wanted to bargain in good faith. The university didn't know how to do that. They paid a lawyer about $450,000, and they named this lawyer the chief of their negotiating team. Wasn't just a hired gun. He was the chief of their negotiating team. He's an evil man, mean Jim Green. He's involved in his long history. He has more blood on his hands for firing public school teachers than any other human being ever in the history of Michigan. And he's gotten rich from it. So it was worth doing. And after the strike began on January 6th, guess what the university did? They went to court asking a judge to order us to go back to work. A classic anti-labor technique from about 1920. And guess what happened? It's the Eastern's in the town of Ypsilanti, which is right next to Ann Arbor in Washtenaw County, the most liberal progressive county in the state of Michigan. We thought we would probably get a pretty good judge, and we got a very good judge. And guess what she did? She said, well, a week from today, we will have a hearing to argue this case. So we had a week's permission to strike. And we issued a press release, and we struck like hell for that week. Hundreds of people out every day, out in front of the administration building on the main street of Ypsilanti. By 8 a.m., we made enough noise that they could not, in their offices, they could not talk to each other without hearing us. And we got lots of press releases, press support. Local politicians came out to support us. People were red. There's been a diminishment of the anti-red, anti-communist, anti-labor ethos. It's a far more popular sentiment, pro-union sentiment with the young people. And I'm 63, so I'm really an old person. But I commend the young for going on supporting strikes. people from other unions came out and supported us, and talked at our rallies, and we won. It took, after the judge issued this order that in a week we'll have a hearing, our lawyer, a very good labor lawyer, said, I believe they will settle this weekend, but we should stay on the picket line Saturday. Take Sunday off, but be prepared to come back Monday. But we'll probably have a contract by then. They reached a contract right around midnight on Sunday night. So we didn't have to go back on the picket line. 5-day strike. It was very much worth it. It was not our strategy to go on strike. It would have been smarter if we had planned on striking, because then we would have had a better plan. But it's unlike in Brookline, it's not a community strike affecting thousands of people, but people, truck drivers, as they passed us, would honk their horns in solidarity, and many people did, and many politicians endorsed us, and including our Congresswoman, Debbie Dingell. So, which was not a preordained thing. I don't think that her late husband, John Dingell, endorsed us when we struck in 2006 or 2004 or 2004. But Debbie Dingell recognizes that politics have changed, and she's with the union. She's with the teachers. And we still have problems at EMU. The slogan, or the kids in the local high schools refer to EMU as extremely messed up. You don't want to go there because the EMU is extremely messed up. And I love EMU. I love working here. I've been working here for a long time, but it's a pretty good tag. Eastern is extremely messed up. Why did we go on strike? Because the university was unwilling to even state what their goals were, except that the university is bankrupt. Well, the university's president gets paid $40,000 a year more than the president of the United States gets paid. And as one student, she brought her sign and joined us on the picket line. Her sign was hand-drawn, picture of two guys, Joe Biden, Jim Smith, with their salary. And then her headline was, only one of these two men had made it easier for me to afford college. And that was President Joe Biden. Now, of course, our president is illiterate and he's a numbskull. And I've said that to him in person. But so it's not a secret. Eastern has extremely bad management, and we hope it will get better one day, but we don't control it. We've just flipped the legislature in Michigan. We have a Democratic trifecta of state government now, so that might affect some things. Probably the state legislature will soon repeal the 10-year-old right to work for less law, and that will be a good thing. Most EMU faculty members are still in the union, but we do have some dues chiselers who've taken advantage of that. Well, I think that's about all I have to say. I'm sorry that I'm not speaking for a full 45 minutes. I usually don't speak for any amount less than 45 minutes.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. All right, folks, we've heard from Jessica from Brookline Educators and Mark from Eastern Michigan University AUP, leaders of unions that went on strike this year. Let's collect some questions. If you have a question or comment, write stack in the chat, and we have a stack keeper. And yeah, Claire.
Thanks. No, I was just going to say
that. Wait, let's hit end record.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Yep, hang on. Thank you. Stopping. Yes.